What's happening, Hardscapers? This is episode 171 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And we'd like to thank our sponsor, Cycle CPA. If you need CFO services, accounting, bookkeeping, whatever it might be, to take control of the numbers in your business, check out Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Mention the How to Hardscape podcast, get $200 off. And on today's episode, we are honored to have the stars of the Not Our Finest Hour podcast, both Mike from Paver King and Chad from Natural Design Landscapes, or the Landscape Daddy, on the show to just talk about questions that came in through Instagram. So if you asked a question, we were able to ask them it on air today for this episode, as well as at the end of this episode, we have a Not Our Finest Hour segment pulled from one of our episodes coming up, so we get a sneak peek, 10-minute sneak peek of a Not Our Finest Hour episode, and it is a good one. So be sure to tune in to the end of the episode to get a sneak peek on the Not Our Finest Hour podcast. And if you are not subscribed to that podcast just yet, please go over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Check that podcast out. Each Friday and sometimes Saturdays, we have an episode being dropped, just the three of us here talking about things that happen in our week, other landscaping topics, and just really anything that comes up in conversation. Truly no holding back, and just three hardscapers, landscapers sitting down and chatting for an hour. That being said, this episode and those episodes are explicit, so please do keep that in mind when listening to this episode, as well as any Not Our Finest Hour podcast episodes. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Today, we're joined by two returning guests from the How to Hardscape podcast, as well as two of the stars of the Not Our Finest Hour podcast. So I'm happy to have these two with me today. We've got Mike from Paver King. Mike, thank you so much for joining us here.
Thanks for having me on, Mike.
And then we've got Chad. Go ahead.
We got two Mikes, one Chad.
Two Mikes, one Chad. That was another title for the Not Our Finest Hour podcast. Two Mikes, one Chad, which we got Chad also from Chad. Is it the Landscape Daddy or Natural Design Landscapes?
You can find me at both, because I have two personalities now. Yes.
And guys, I really do appreciate you joining me here for the How to Hardscape podcast. And the reason why we're having this episode is to not just have these guys on the show, which is always a privilege to have you guys on the show, through our I'm a Hardscaper interviews, roundtable interviews, as well as our roundtable rallies, but to also spread awareness of this new podcast that we've got going, the Not Our Finest Hour podcast. And to kick things off, we figured that we would just ask the How to Hardscape and everybody in the community questions that we could ask these two stars of the Not Our Finest Hour podcast. So we've got many different questions to get through here today. And starting with this one here, in reference to the Not Our Finest Hour podcast, and specifically directed to Mike. Mike,
perfect.
Audio needs an upgrade. Made it hard to listen, to be honest. When is the audio being upgraded on your end, Mike?
The audio seems to have been upgraded. I feel like the audio has been upgraded right now. I think on the 4th episode, the audio gets upgraded, but my internet connection sucks. So, I also feel I agree that it's hard to listen to anyways. Never mind when the audio sucks. It's challenging to listen to begin with. So I appreciate someone sticking it out and toughing it out for the first 3 episodes. Episode 4, it should get better.
And then episode 5 is where we hit our prime here. So hopefully it continues to get better. Otherwise, we've hit our prime on episode number 5 here. And we do have a question for both of you guys here, coming from New Leaf, Ottawa. And actually, he sent in a couple of different questions as well. He's been sharing every episode of the Not Our Finest Hour podcast. So New Leaf, Ottawa, thank you so much for being a listener and sticking through Mike's poor audio of those first 3 episodes. But New Leaf Ottawa asks, Freudian slip there. What has been the most cowboy landscape work you have ever seen. And this was touched a little bit on, I think, the first episode where Chad rips apart every Kitchener landscaper, hardscaper work that there has ever been, myself included. But what has been the most cowboy landscape work you guys have ever seen? And I believe he asked the next question, which is also, while you guys think about that, what is a landscape pet peeve that you recognize in the industry, whether that's local or something that you see on Instagram? So those two questions kind of go hand in hand here. Cowboy landscape work you've ever seen, or landscape pet peeve that you see?
Go for it, Chad.
Oh, I was going to say, you take it away. You've seen tens of hundreds of more years of landscapes than I have.
Landscape pet peeve is F-flow. I fucking hate it. I'm sorry. I hate it. It drives me insane. I know everyone's trying to normalize it and make it like it's like a normal thing. I have no use for it. It's a pet peeve. I hate opening a bundle. You see it. Should I lay it? Is it going to go away? Is it not going to go away? Should I just throw away this $6 slab and say it's garbage because no one's going to return it? I just hate it. It's everything about F-flow is my pet peeve. 100%.
I'll bounce off that a little bit. Mike doesn't like F-flow. I don't like sand issues, whether they are mine or not. I really don't think they're mine a lot of the time. But we've had a couple jobs where sand didn't harden, or it's a year old and it's soft and it's coming out of the joints, and we got to go back and pressure wash. Not all the time, but it seems that anytime we get a call back from a residential client, it's because of some sort of sand failure.
Two great points to come across there, as well as I would just throw in my 2 cents here of pavers being used as caps. Seeing those spacer bars on the side there, and oh man, that really frustrates me to see personally. I guess kind of separating these two questions and continuing what we just talked about there. What about cowboy landscape? Something that you've seen at a supplier, something that you've seen on the road that you think does not meet road safety standards, or anything like that you've seen with cowboy landscaping? How about anything like that?
So number one, cowboy landscaping is people who don't use tarps.
Yeah.
Like hundreds of dump trailers rolling around with like no tarp, mulch not tarped, or sand not tarped, or HPV. Anyways, like it's just like a, it's definitely like a cowboy look to not tarp your load. I mean, I feel like it's common decency, so that you're not smashing shit through people's windshields or whatever. I don't like. I think that's a kind of a cowboy thing to be doing. Also, putting 10 yards of HPV in your 3.5 ton dump trailer is towing behind your F-150. Those are some pretty cowboy moves out there on the road, I guess.
I get that.
Good points.
Yeah. I can't say offhand I can recall something super cowboy. I'll go back to the running shoes on the job site thing, or installing in like basketball shorts or something. That to me, that's a cowboy. I mean, I know you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, whatever. If you're in basketball shorts and running shoes, a hardscape job site is not the place for you.
I guess like a cowboy pet peeve move to me is all like, and it happens constantly. I drive by job sites and guys are doing a driveway with 60 or 50 mil like slab pavers that don't meet the aspect ratio.
Yeah,
that happens like in our area. I bet half the driveways you drive by are like 60 mil Blue or 60 mil Beacon Hill or 50 mil Travista. I've seen guys putting in driveways and they're way outside that. And it's like, they just don't want to spend the extra $1 a square foot, which on a driveway that's what these people wouldn't pay $1,000 to get 80 mil stone. Like, I don't know, maybe it's $1.50. I don't know. I'm sure someone will type in some exact cost difference, but like, that drives me. That's like a cowboy thing that drives me nuts. It immediately tells me you don't know what you're doing if you're putting like a slab paver like that at 60 mil in the driveway.
I have so many stories about that, and this interview isn't about me, but that just popped into my mind that working for a supplier, I had a client or retail customer come in and say that they wanted to buy 24 by 24 brick impression to use as their driveway, and I was letting them know that no, you cannot do that. That does not absolutely work. and they went ahead and made that purchase. And I just hope I come across that driveway someday in my life, because that would be really interesting to see how that turns out. Moving on to the next question here. Designscape Ottawa asks, do you guys make the podcast seem like it has a no beginning or end just to mess with people? Or what is the reason behind the no intro, no outro podcast for Not Our Finest Hour?
I can take that. Like, honestly, like, we don't want to make it easy to listen to. We don't give a fuck if you listen or not. We don't really care. Like, there is no, if you want something to be easy in life, go listen to Joe Rogan. It's easy to listen to. Like, this is a hardscape podcast meant for hard people. Hard men, hard women are going to listen to this motherfucking podcast, and it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. The audio is going to be terrible. You're not going to understand what I'm saying. You're going to have to listen to it twice. There is no beginning and there is no end. And if that's the kind of satisfaction you're looking for, it's just not the right place for you to be. But please keep listening. We appreciate it. We really do. We appreciate every download. We're the 170th most downloaded business podcast in Canada, which is a really screwed up metric, but remember it.
I have an update to that number when we get to that. But that being said, we do, if you listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, there's no real definitive intro or outro besides saying hello and goodbye.
I've never listened to it.
Okay, I gotcha.
You listen to the Kid Contractor podcast, there's a clear start and end. So there you go.
Absolutely. As well as the How to Hardscape podcast. So we're trying to also appear like a legitimate podcast as well here. And coming to our next question here, Pride_Hardscape asks, in getting to a little bit of value here, how do you schedule jobs more than a year out to start date? Do you book for that far out? Do you have a sort of, and this is just me riffing on this question, do you have sort of a cutoff as to like what your backlog is? Or do you just continue to book? And then what does that look like when discussing that with the clients? Chad is a little bit different because you're working commercially mostly as well there. So Mike and Chad, this will probably vary.
I think that makes Chad's residential booking more interesting, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, because how are you, I've done it, commercial and residential. Like, so how do you do it? I'm interested.
So obviously for us, commercial gets priority. You can't flex commercial timelines a lot of the time, right? They're waiting on either a road to be open or a million other things, school to be open. Those things are pretty fixed. So I'll tell people we got a pretty jam-packed commercial schedule, but if you're willing to work with us, we'll get you in as soon as we can. Thankfully, the last 2 years, the workload or everybody's workload has been so high that people just want it done. They don't care when, they just want to be on the list. They don't care when it's getting done. So that's worked to our advantage. It'll be interesting to see how that goes moving forward. I've always been pretty fluid with our booking though, like because there's 6 or 7 of us, we can split up and put 3 guys on commercial, 3 guys on a residential, and basically it's whoever yells the loudest is whose job gets done next.
I don't have a schedule at all. So like recently we had 2 of our 4, like we had a 4-person residential crew, and 2 of the guys moved on. So now we have a 2-person residential crew, which the foreman was a little bit stressed about, but I just said like, hey man, like, I don't have a deposit from these people. I didn't make any promise that we'd ever do their job. Like I just tell people like, listen, you're in the queue, and when we get to yours, we get to it. And I think this year there's going to be people that have to wait till next spring. But once you cross the boundary of September, what do people really care? Like if you're first in April or you're last in December, like I think I'm just over the whole, I used to have a hard schedule and try to follow it to every minute. And now I'm just like, sign the contract, send it back to us the day before we start, send us, I think it's 25%. I'm probably wrong. You'd have to ask Kelly. I know Jack about that end of the business, but I think it's 25% the day before we start, or we won't show up. And then we start the job and we do it. And then whenever we're done, we're done. I tell the guys that where most important for us is customer satisfaction, a very, very high level of quality, and that everyone on the crew gets along and has a good day at work. So the rest of it will fall into place. And if we find using that system that I'm not pricing high enough, I'll put the rates up. We don't enforce a timeline on our staff. We don't promise a timeline to our customers. We promise a high quality job and that they'll be satisfied when we leave the property. And so far that's worked. But I didn't always have it that way. That's just, I guess, the 50-year-old way of doing things was not the 25-year-old way. We don't work weekends. We don't work on we don't work holidays. We don't, they're starting a job that's sort of out of our district. I told them, start at 7, work till 4, go home. Make sure you're home in time for dinner with your family. The job takes a day longer. I don't care. Whatever. It is what it is. All of this is totally opposite to what everyone else preaches. I understand that.
I was going to say, everybody else will tell you the exact opposite. We have a schedule and we have to be done by this time. And you have 14 hours and 15 minutes to get this done and 3 hours to do the sand and 1.25 hours to do the edging.
You don't get a high quality of work doing that. And all I care about is the highest quality of work. And because if all you care about is the highest quality of work, you can charge whatever you want for it. People will pay anything for a Rolex. They'll only pay $300 for an Apple Watch because an Apple Watch is cheap shit. So those are max, they'll pay for it. But a Rolex, people will pay the initial price and then it'll go up in value after you take it home because it's a Rolex. Because Rolex didn't have a timeline to build that watch. Someone took their time, built it by hand. It's a very specific item. So that's how we run our business. We build Rolexes. Even if it's someone's little front walkway that's like a 100 square foot front walkway with one step, it's built like a Rolex. And someone else might do it in 6 hours. It takes us 2 days, but it's built like a Rolex. Every piece of detail is paid attention to. I'm not saying it's for everyone. Although everyone told me that social media was a total joke and I should never waste my time on it 10 years ago. So there you go. I was doing the opposite of what everyone else was doing then. I always do the opposite of what everyone else does. But it also doesn't create any stress for me. And say if I use that system and I have no stress and I get to the end of the year and I made $15,000 less because the guys took some time and did a really high quality of work and make sure our customers were satisfied. I don't give a fuck about 15 grand in the grand scheme of things. That amount of money makes no difference to my life. What makes a difference is happy customers and happy staff. That makes a big difference in my life. $15,000 does nothing for me. It doesn't even buy a fucking buggy.
No buggy life for 15 grand.
I just want to take a break from today's episode to talk about our sponsor, Cycle CPA. You may have a CRM or project management software in place, but what data are you using to ensure your estimating is accurate? Having a proper accounting setup and accurate bookkeeping done is key to understanding overhead expenses and other costs that must be recouped in your estimates. Cycle CPA is a remote bookkeeping and CFO firm that helps to connect the dots from the financial reports to the hardscape and landscape data needed in order to reach high profits. They provide landscape and hardscape industry benchmarking, job costing, financials by service line, advisory meetings, and much more. Cycle CPA's team of accountants are specialized within the hardscape and landscape industry, and you can visit them at cyclecpa.com, and for $200 off, mention the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode.
So that brings up a lot of different questions that come into my mind personally, Mike, that you just talked about that. One thing that stuck out was you don't do what necessarily everyone else is doing. And I've felt that with my life as well. Like when you do something, as long as that doesn't and exactly what you're talking about there, doesn't take down the quality. If you're doing what other people are not doing, it tends to work out in the end. And with that being said, how long did it take for you to establish a reputation of not, letting that quality go, of being a high quality company that allows you to charge for that high quality? How long did that take you to establish that reputation? Or did you have that reputation coming into kind of your previous experiences in starting Paver King?
I think when we started this business, I already carried that kind of weight, but we've been in a lot of catalogs, and there's a lot of ways to make people understand the different level you're doing things at. I mean, our quote is incredibly intense. It lists every single thing we're doing, like every single thing we're supplying. It's definitely different than the napkin quote or the like. And honestly, I don't think we do a lot of like bidding against other people anymore. I don't think I was in that situation a long time ago, but I don't think I've been in that situation for a while. And now generally if I am, I just tell them to hire the other guy. I'm good. I've never sat at home a day in my life. I've worked every fucking day. Hire the other guy. I'm cool with that. I hope you're happy. I hope your project works out for you. I hope it's good for your family to hire the other guy or woman, whoever it is. Like I think it's how you carry yourself, what level you're willing to explain what you're doing. I know some young guys that have an incredible rep for quality in our area, and that's because they take the time to explain every single thing they're going to do. If you want to have a shitty sales process where you literally just send a total is $10,000 in an email and not explain anything, then and that's the business you want to run, I respect that. That's great. But you make way more money with a pen than you ever will with a shovel. You cannot shovel your way to a good price, no matter what you can do. You have a shitty price, it's a shitty price no matter what. I know I've said that on this podcast like 100 times before, so it's like not new advice, but it is solid advice. Like, you can't shovel it. You can't shovel your way to a good price. You can't price something at 10 grand that should have been 15 grand and say, oh, we're going to do it really fast, man. It's going to be great. Everything's going to go perfectly. We're going to make lots of money. Then it becomes low quality. Customers are pissed off. It ends up taking longer. You end up losing more than you would have done if you'd just done a good quality job. I mean, I've fucked up prices. It didn't affect how we did the job. That's another thing. I fuck up tons of shit. I've done it this year several times. Like I just busy or not paying attention or missed something. I'm not, but it didn't affect how the job was completed. On the Not Our Finest Hour podcast, we talk about the amount of barbecue tops I've bought this year because that was a total show. It was the right decision to buy a $2,000 barbecue top to fix the thing that got fucked up in the customer's eyes. So that's what we did. Cost me $2,000. Okay, well, it still was right, and there was no stress on the installer. There was no stress on us. It's $2,000. Okay, whatever. Like I get there's people that stress about it, and they're going to be way richer than me. And if they think that that's what leads them to have a better life is to have way more money than me, then I'm happy for them. It's just not what I believe. Like if I had $50,000 less at the end of the year, but every customer was happy and every staff member was happy and everything went well and everyone was enjoying their lives, I don't care about $50,000. As long as our bills are paid. I mean, I don't want to like say that and then we're losing our fucking house. But like if our bills are paid and Kelly and I's salaries are paid and our kids are having a good life and can do the things they want to do, I don't like whatever. Like would I rather have $50,000? Yeah, but I'm not going to be all stressed out about it. I did that once in my life. It sucks. Sucks to yell at people and treat people like garbage to try and get them to go faster and adhere to some crazy timeline on some fucking app. It sucks. I've done it. We'll never do it again. If it works for your business, if you want your guys to check in and out on every single thing they can do on an app, I'm happy for you. It's just never going to be me. It's not my personality. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. I'm not doing it. But your business is probably better run. And when you go to the bank, you'll probably do better than I will with the bank, but whatever. We seem to be doing okay.
I do have a follow-up question to you, Chad, about what you said earlier with your hours that you have implemented for different tasks sort of thing. But I do kind of want to stick on one other thing that Mike here said, as well as maybe I even asked this question to Chad. What is that cutoff where, Mike, you said, hey, if it's the right thing to do in the client's eyes and my eyes, like that $2,000 barbecue top is nothing, right? It just makes sense. It's the right thing to do. What about if you feel like you're in the right and the client thinks that they're in the right? What's that dollar amount cutoff where you're like, you know what, like this client is just going to take me for everything I am, that if I don't stick my foot in the sand now, they're just going to continue to peck away at different things. Do you have like a dollar amount cutoff? Is it, I'm sure it's more so about like the client and feeling them out, but where is that cutoff for you? Or if you can explain sort of your process with kind of understanding the clients a little bit more in determining like what that dollar amount would be?
Oh, that's tough.
And it's a tough question.
So for me, I think in a situation like that, I can't say I've ever really been in it, but to me, the best thing for me, for the business, for the client, is to make them happy and get out of there as quickly as possible, and to get in another position where I can be profitable on another job, right? So I don't know if you want to put a dollar amount to it, like, I don't know, how much can you screw up in your estimating to not account for something major? Like, are we talking about a $5,000 wall? Are we talking about they thought you were putting in a grill island whenever you were putting in a garden wall or something, right? Like, I don't know.
So here, so I have an example from last year, so last year I was standing in the back, like we have in our contracts, we have nothing to do with electrical, nothing to do with gas, especially when it's around a pool. I don't want shit all to do with it. It's not my problem. Anyways, in the contract, he specifically states we have nothing to do with electrical. I was standing in the middle of the backyard, and the electrician, who was a friend of mine, who was just was doing some electrical work for me on the property. And the homeowner said to me, "What power do we need to run to the pump at the back?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "Well, what kind of power do you need?" I said, "Okay, well, last time I had a pool, an above ground pool, this is an in-ground pool we're standing by, but an above ground pool that I had in my life." I said, "It was like a 120 plug. It just plugged into the wall like anything else." And they went, "Oh, great." Then they took that information and ran 120 to the back when really they needed 240 or 220 or whatever the runs a dryer to run the pump for this pool because it had a spa. So when that all comes out that you can't turn the pump on, everyone's coming to me because they're like, "Well, you said 120." And I'm like, "I said I wanted nothing to do with this. And it says that I have nothing to do with this in my contract." But admittedly, I did say my old above ground pool had a 120 pump. Like, I did say that. And so I don't know, the cost to get to 240 to the back was like $5,000. This is a big job we're doing, right? And so I called the homeowner and I said, "Listen, I'm going to accept some of this, I guess." Because
you really should have accepted none of it.
I agree with you, but in the name of saying I want to get my last payment, I want to pack up the job, it's the last thing we're doing, I want the pool to run before we leave because I just think that that's the right thing to do. I said, "Why don't we split it 50-50?" And she said, "Okay." She totally, and that was fine. That's how I handled it then. As terms of a dollar figure, I guess it would depend on the size of the job. Gotcha. If I'm doing a $300 job and it's some $200 thing, I'd be like, "Yeah, no, bro." I guess in the end, though, I agree with you, Chad, 100%. Whenever something goes wrong for us, I just try to end the pain as quickly as possible, no matter what.
Stop the bleeding. Find somewhere where you can be in a better headspace, better profitability space. And I've had clients that I just didn't see eye to eye with at the end of it, and we'll give them, to our best ability, what we can, go a little further, and then get out and onto somewhere where we're all happier to be.
You mentioned being able to break down different tasks and keeping your crew to a certain time allotted to certain tasks that you need to get done by. Is that based on you note taking from previous experiences to be like, "Hey, this is what we need to stick to in terms of our production rates"? Is this in terms of you pricing the job and knowing that you need to be able to do this to make this X amount of money? How do you kind of structure that? If you can expand on that.
So I was completely bullshitting, right? I guess that wasn't clear, but no, I don't take account of how long it takes to put in edging or sanding or cutting and all this shit. I mean, I've been doing this for 17, 18 years now. It's all in my dome. I know, or I think I know at least, how long it's going to take to put up the wall or glue the caps or cut the caps or cut in the border or something like that, right? And even if I'm wrong, it's fine if we're a little over, right? I'm not a slave driver. The guys know what needs to get done. They're completely capable. They can do a great job at it. So what does it matter if it takes a few hours, or like Mike said, a day longer, as long as the client's happy with the results. These things take time, right? Like, so how can you push these guys to work a little faster or harder? And it's 40 degrees one day and 21 degrees the next day, you know, like all these things are going to change the timeline. So for me, I know a ton of people would disagree, but I just don't follow that whole mentality of you got to stick to a certain timeline for a job or a certain mechanism to have all of your processes dialed in. To me, like, I just couldn't sleep at night if I was thinking about how many hours it takes to do something. It just takes what it takes, and the job gets done, and everybody's happy in the end, and we're on to the next one.
As we kind of come down to wraps on this episode, at least before we play a little bit of the Not Our Finest Hour podcast on the end of this podcast, I do have one last question that did come through. It is a little bit more personal, so you guys definitely don't have to answer this, but I'll ask it because it came through. And that is from 3 Seasons Landscapes. Chris over there asks, what's the most amount of money each of you have had in your business bank accounts?
Accounts receivable or
Yeah. There's a big difference
in the
there,
account
baby.
at the time, because that's a huge difference.
Ellie and I just went through how much money I'm owed, like we're owed as of today.
Yeah. I'll pull
That's
that up
not in our bank account. But I can, like, I'm not, like, it's personal. Like, I guess it is a personal question, but like,
Yeah, you don't have to answer.
So the
that.
mo-
This
the
is
mo-
just
like-
a way to.
I'll play ball with that every day. I don't care.
yeah, I'm
I don't care.
willing to
Like,
go. Like, if you're
There's
talking
so
about-
much you don't know, right? Like,
Yeah.
how much of that is profit? How much of that is
Right.
materials out? How
Yeah.
much of that is wages? How much is, like, it's completely, it really doesn't matter. It's not my bottom line or anything like that.
so like for us currently, we have one client that owes us $375,000. That's one client, and that's one client, and then we probably have another 250,000 owing on top of that. That's where we stand right now as a company. In the bank,
It doesn't matter. How much is it?
yeah. Well,
It's all coming, right?
but in the bank, like, we could, like, tomorrow's Tuesday. There's probably a bunch of people that didn't, like, especially with the trucking items. There's a bunch of people that didn't pay us on Friday because it was a long weekend. They were going away. Totally get it. Totally understand. Tuesday morning rolls around. We might collect $30,000 on Tuesday in one day, like, just because of the trucking thing. We have a residential job that's finishing up, like a large scale residential job we're finishing up. Like, it's an ebb and flow of the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
No,
it's
makes sense.
where are you?
So I'll, like, reading right off the accounting software. Due right now, 149,000. Overdue right now, that's past 60 days, 250,000, with another 200,000 that hasn't been invoiced yet. So what does that make? 600K.
Think
Give or take.
Think you're beating me.
Wow.
Think you're winning.
It's not a pissing contest.
I know. It's a pissing
Everybody
contest.
makes it, I owe more money, or
No.
you owe more money.
No,
It's like, not about that at all.
you're
Anyway.
winning a bad race.
Yeah. The moral of the story is commercial contracting can sometimes suck, and it really doesn't matter what your numbers are, as long as you're profitable and you're having a good time, right?
And you're having a good time.
I honestly have the theory that if I wake up one day and no one owes me money, I'm
Yeah.
like, and I get that goes against a lot. Like, I think it's more of a commercial mindset, Chad, than like residential. You finish a job, you get paid. If someone owes you money, you're fine because you should have been paid. The job's over. But commercial, and even then with the trucking, if I wake up one day and no one owes me any money, I've, like, all that stuff is payable 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Like, that means I did no work for some period of time, and I'm absolutely screwed because I won't have any money that I can call to collect. I would never, that's a really false misnomer there. Kelly would call to collect. I would never, ever call someone to collect money. It's totally not money. But I just, if I wake up and no one owes us money, I know I'm totally screwed.
Yeah.
Totally screwed. I would that would, people owing us money does not bother me at all. I don't even think about it. I just get up every day and I go back to work.
Yeah.
But if no one owed us money, I wouldn't sleep at night. I would be staring at the sky all night.
Like if the jobs board was empty, then I would worry a lot more than I do with money owing to us, right?
Yeah.
Like if I look up here on my job board and I see like 2 jobs instead of 50 jobs, then you're right. That's a scary part for sure.
Well, Mike and Chad, we do need to get to recording our next episode of the Not Our Finest Hour podcast. So after this interview, immediately after, you're going to be listening to a segment from the Not Our Finest Hour podcast, a segment where Mike's audio is pristine, not one of those episodes where you could complain about it. So before we get into playing that episode, Mike, Chad, I want to ask you guys for closing comments, remarks, anything that you would want to leave the How to Hardscape audience with, as well as, or besides that, what would you do? What would you say to prepare someone to listening to the Not Our Finest Hour podcast? What would you give them in terms of priming them to begin to listen to this Not Our Finest Hour podcast? Mike, do you want to kick things off here?
So my life advice is run the business that makes you happy, not the business that makes someone on Instagram happy. That's my life advice. And then, I would tell you to make sure that you don't have little people listening in the truck with you if you're going to listen to the Not Our Finest Hour podcast, because it is definitely not a hold back podcast. So, and it's talking like people actually talk. So, but that would be my advice. Run the business that makes you happy, not the business that makes some other dude on Instagram happy.
Excellent advice. Both pieces there. And Chad, on to you.
Okay. Advice. I'd say go out and work harder. Whatever you're doing, you can probably work just a little bit harder. That's what we've always tried to do, as long as you're still having fun doing it. Work a little bit harder. You'll find you make a little bit more money, and soon you won't be worried about counting your pennies. The dollars will find themselves. As far as the podcast goes, it's a little more raw, or a lot more raw than maybe what a lot of you guys are used to listening to. Not so polished. I think that says a lot about the 3 of us. But it's honestly a blast to record. So hopefully you guys love what you're listening to, or sort of gravitate towards it a little bit. I'm sure you've all had some terrible experiences as contractors. We definitely have. So hopefully you can ride along with us for this.
So now we're just going to turn it over to a 10-minute or so segment from the Not Our Finest Hour podcast from an episode coming up. We already have 4 or 5 episodes released, and we have episodes coming out every Friday and sometimes even Saturdays. So without further ado, we'll just turn it on over to the Not Our Finest Hour podcast.
Whenever I have people who are worried about the cost of pavers, I always say the same thing to them. The patio is irrelevant. It's who you sit on the patio with.
That's deep.
Dang. Is this still deep. Part of the, is this like our extended hour? Because that just made the podcast.
I've said that for like 10 or 15, because people feel bad because they'll flip open the catalog to something that costs $10 or $12 a square foot. And they'll be like, I want that. And I'll be like, I'm just letting you know, that's $10 or $12 a square foot. And you're talking you have 1,000 square feet here. Just letting you know, you're expanding your cost of your pavers by $4,000 by picking that. If it's worth it to you, I'm not here to judge. I'm just letting you know. And they'll be upset, and I'm like, does it honestly really matter what the patio is made out of, as long as it's functional space that drains well, and who's on the patio with you matters more. But that's the greatest secret of the industry. The greatest secret of the industry is when people look at the ads for pavers, they look at all the people enjoying themselves on the patio. They don't look at the fucking inlay in the patio. It's the same as if a driveway is 4x8 pavers and there's 4 cars parked on it, no one knows that it's 4x8 pavers, or if it's the fucking fan driveway, because all they see is the 4 cars parked on it. there's an endless amount of stuff that all of us do that we are only doing for when another landscaper walks by or drives by.
You're right. I think you just added too much value to this.
Oh God, please.
This portion of the show.
If that doesn't get us
that was
three
deep.
more listeners,
That was deep.
I don't know what else will.
Wow.
That's 3 more listeners. Yeah.
Wow.
I drive by and look at stuff like we did this like really sick job. Like, I was like $275,000 job in like, I don't know, like 2011, which back then was like crazy money, right? To me, anyways, in 2011. And I go back, the driveway is still mint because we did it the right way. And I've been back, I've done a couple things around the house since, but like every time I go there, the driveway's sick, but it's got like 5 cars parked on it. So I'm like, I'm gonna go by and take a picture of that house. And I go by, I'm like, oh, there's a picture of 5 cars on the fucking driveway. Sick. Glad I spent so much time on that motherfucker. Like, I just people cover shit in patio front. Like,
Yeah.
Like our patio at home, we did it last year. It's built out of a discontinued colored paver. That's autumn red, which I actually like the color. I used it on a few jobs because I thought it was a unique color. It's not like the old school red. It's got
I like that red actually.
Really, yeah, I did. It's got a nice beige in it. It was so. Anyways, our patio's this autumn red paver because it was discontinued, and I got a good deal on it. And I when I was building it, I was like, yeah, I don't care if I'm sitting out here with my wife and my kids or whatever. Like, no one's gonna be like, this red patio is totally ruining my experience in your backyard. I'm never coming back here because your patio is autumn red. I'm literally never coming to your yard. I can't stand being in this yard. No one's ever said that. So I guess
we did this autumn red. It was an entranceway with a driveway apron, but the guy had a big like storm sewer because it was one of those driveways that are one of those garages that are underneath the house with the driveway pitching. So we did this big autumn red inlay around this storm sewer, but it looked like a butthole that was irritated because it was like a fiery red around this like rusted manhole. It just the client didn't like, we didn't tell that to the client, but all we could think of was like an irritated butthole.
Speaking of weird
driveway,
one of the most disappointing moments of my whole landscaping career, we did this huge patio, and in the patio were 2 catch basins. And this was a long time ago before all these like wrought iron rusted things were in style. And I convinced this homeowner to pay for these wrought iron drains that patina that look like a sun in the middle of the patio. I mean, they're fucking beautiful. And so we put them in the patio, and we got on the roof, and I have pictures from up above, and I have pictures like I'm going to find them and post them and mention them because these things were just so fucking perfect, and they were patinaing. They looked amazing. It was before that rust thing was really in style, because this was like 2010, maybe. I think we did this. That was a long time ago. And I was so happy with them. And I went by one day to meet them about doing some project out front. And I went in the backyard, and they had fucking spray painted them black because they didn't like the rust. I was like, it looks like plastic. It looks like a plastic sun. Like, why would you do that? It looks like a weird black plastic sun. I was like, it was so perfect before. And they were like, well, we didn't like them, and it's our house. And I'm like, now I say to people all the time, it's your house. I'm going to be here for a brief time.
Yeah.
We'll build what you want. Like, because I learned my lesson with the rusting suns. I gotta find that it was just, they're just so epically, like, because this has like a granite stairway going up, like natural granite stairway on one side, and then we used real cobblestones as the border because she didn't want fake cobblestones, so we actually cut cobblestones in half down to 60 mil. Well, some of them we cut twice to get them 60 mil and laid them around. The job is epic project. Minus she wouldn't let us get rid of the concrete ring around the pool, but whatever, I digress. And these like perfect sons. And they just spray painted them black with trim clad. Trim cladded those motherfuckers. I was like, oh my God. Like, you're breaking my heart. Like, because when people came over and sat on the deck, they'd be looking down at this, like the drains that should have been ugly. The drains that should have been ugly and been a huge deterrent to the whole job became like the highlight of the project. And now they've gone back to looking like cheap plastic black drains. Anyways.
Oh, well.
Do we have enough for the extra episode?
We may have extended it enough for that extra episode.
I think you gave him too much with those comments, though. That insight.
At least with that comment, like, even if this is a 3-minute episode, we're good.
We're good.
They at least got something out of that.
Yeah, download this for a 3-minute commentary. So should we announce this is the end? Because I think we need to make a conscious point.
Yeah.
Because we have to do what the listeners want. We announced the end once, but then we didn't end. So now this is the end of the second end of the third end of the side order of ending. Right now.
Well, there's a whole nother thing is in like this podcast never ends. Like every episode, you know, it's kind of like when we hang up the towel, when we call it quits, that's when we'll give you your outro, right?
Hang on. When our incredible wealth from being 235th most downloaded podcast divides us, and we can't divide the wealth because we didn't give proper credit like the lead singer of U2 did. What's his fucking name?
Bono.
He gave writing credit to everyone in the band so they wouldn't break up over money. But he wrote all the songs.
Mike, do we get writing credit on all these episodes, me and Chad?
Why wouldn't we all get writing credit? Everyone's talking. Everyone's talking. Why wouldn't we all get writing credit? Like, I'm just saying that he did that so the band wouldn't break up. So when we get rich from this podcast, when we're Joe Roganing,
we're not going to break up. Yeah,
we're moving this to we will. I don't know if you guys saw my note, but when I get deplatformed like Tate,
who's that? Is that the
Andrew Tate?
Oh yeah, I have a daughter.
Top G.
I don't know anything about him other than he speaks poorly about women, and
he actually doesn't. If you listen to everything,
I
don't know. He does periodically while he speaks. Anyways, he's the top G, and he got deplatformed. So I'm like, am I going to get deplatformed? Find me over on Rumble. I don't even know what the fuck that is. Like they're like, get him on Rumble, and I'm like, I don't even know what Rumble is. I don't follow him anyways. He just came in my TikTok 5,000.
Is that like Grindr?
No, I just found out what Rumble was this weekend because I don't know what it is. Exactly what Mike's saying there. It's just like a YouTube for anybody. Like they don't take anybody off.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you want to hear a funny story that I heard?
Is this still part of the episode?
Yeah, this is fun. This is extending the extended episode. Okay. Talking about Andrew Tate. So a guy that works for us. This was years ago. Someone just told me the story. Was joined Bumble, which is like a dating app, I guess. I didn't know this, but it's some kind of dating app. And you get Bumble points, and the more Bumble points you get, the more it introduces you to women. So one of the ways to get Bumble points is this is like you're really getting a bonus episode here because now we're talking about a dating app.
Yeah.
This is where the real business advice comes from on this.
I just need to say the way you mentioned that, like the more Bumble points you get, it starts introducing you to women. So it's like you got to start off with the men first, work your way through the men, so and then you start to get points, and then it's like, okay, now it's.
So this is how it was explained to me. One of the ways to get some Bumble points is to let Bumble send an email or a text to everyone in your phone, in your Rolodex or whatever they call it, your contacts. If you hit yes, you get you get Bumble points for every single person that gets invited to Bumble by you. And then you get more when they join. Unfortunately, if you hit that button, it also sends that to your wife.
Oh.
Wow.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Once again, go check out the Not Our Finest Hour podcast if you want more from what you just heard in these last 10 minutes here. And thank you to our sponsor, Cycle CPA, for sponsoring today's episode. If you need CFO services, accounting, bookkeeping, whatever it might be, check them out, cyclecpa.com. Mention How to Hardscape to get $200 off your services there. And we look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.